The Cavs and the Celtics just delivered yet another classic Eastern Conference duel. Boston was shorthanded without both Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, and the Cavs responded by going to all sorts of creative lineups and adjustments in a game that had serious playoff feel, potentially giving us a glimpse into this year's conference finals matchup. The beginning of this game was all Boston, and it started with their ability to play one-on-one. Of course, they've got the 5-out offense, so anytime Tatum beats his man and help is forced to come to the paint, it's a pretty easy kick out to a high-level shooter. But one thing you'll notice is that the Cavs will do everything in their power to keep Mobley as close to the basket as possible so that the Celtics couldn't get any clean looks in the paint. So what the Celtics did is they actually hunted for a switch onto Mobley. Then he's no longer in a position to rotate to the rim, creating all the space they need for those isolations. And I should also mention that in addition to the game plan functioning in the way they wanted it to, it felt like they had a literal magnet from the three-point line. They opened this game making 7 of their first 9 threes, and no matter how you slice it up, you're not winning the math against that. It was the exact opposite for the Cavs. I actually don't think they had much trouble creating the shots they wanted early on. They just couldn't hit anything. When Garland rejects a ball screen, he's left with space to pull up for a 3, and it doesn't fall. Then a minute later, when he again rejected a screen, this time he drove, drew some help, and kicked it to Strus for a great look from the corner that also didn't fall. In addition to the lack of shooting, they also had a few sloppy and avoidable turnovers, especially in transition, and after turning it over on an inbound about 5 minutes into the game, the Celtics moved the ball around the perimeter until it eventually found Tatum in the corner, where he hit a 3 to give them a remarkable 25-3 lead. This is where you really miss Porzingis though, because it was time for the Luke Kornet minutes, and the Cavs finally found some offense by attacking him in the pick and roll. He's pretty exclusively a drop defender, so with him in place of Horford, they lose some switchability, and without the length or overall presence of Porzingis, he just doesn't have the same effect. Guys like Garland, Mitchell, and Ty Jerome had a field day turning the corner and attacking him in drop, getting quality look after quality look. And with Pritchard in the game as a weaker point of attack defender, it became an even bigger issue as a guy like Jerome had to deal with basically no resistance on his way to a floater. Then when the Celtics finally had Kornet switch onto Jerome, he backed it up, walked him down in isolation, and used that cushion of space to pull up for a triple. The issues with Kornet aren't exclusive to defense though. They also lose the benefits of the 5-out offense, so Jarrett Allen is able to cheat way over in the paint to help on a post-up, forcing Brown to fade away instead of going to the rim. Then whenever the Celtics used Kornet as a screener to pull Allen to the ball, the Cavs would switch, then very aggressively close out to shooters, knowing they don't have to worry about scrambling behind the play. And when Allen switches onto the ball, he knows that he can press way up on the jumper because he has help behind him, which led to much tougher shots for Tatum in isolation. It was the same thing when Tatum hunted for Garland. That's a huge size advantage, but Allen only has to worry about playing the paint because Kornet isn't a threat to shoot, so Tatum's left with a tougher shot that he actually knocks down. This continued when Mobley checked in, switching all actions and pressing way up on the jumper, and again they're able to force Tatum into a really tough shot. The only problem is that Tatum was on one, so no matter how difficult they made things or how effective help was in the paint, he still found ways to put the ball in the basket. He had 18 points in the first quarter alone, and this tough step back jumper over Mobley takes us to the buzzer, with the Celtics still holding on to a 12-point lead. In the second, Boston tried out a different lineup, leaving both Horford and Kornet on the floor together. The goal was to counter Cleveland's switching by creating mismatches in the post, then if help comes, they can spray it out to one of those shooters. The Cavs weren't too worried about post-ups though. They were comfortable giving up the switch, then whoever was on the big would aggressively front the post, while everyone else clogged up the passing lanes. The Cavs also threw a zone at the Celtics during these minutes, knowing that with Kornet on the floor, they can keep Mobley in the paint. Then when he's forced to step out to Jaylen Brown, you're going to see Mitchell and Wade execute a scram switch to avoid the mismatch, again forcing tougher one-on-one offense. On the other side, the Celtics did something similar. They put Horford on Mobley and Kornet on a wing to prevent him from being attacked in the primary action. That way he can roam and protect the paint, but the Cavs countered by having that wing crash from the corner for second chance opportunities. It's such an easy to miss but effective counter to the defense leaving wings open. Kornet's cheating way over to help on Mitchell's drive, and with Horford on Mobley, there's nobody tracking Dean Wade, so he's able to crash baseline and get some easy points at the rim. This is also when things started to swing for the Cavs in terms of shooting luck. Remember, they started off cold, so now it was time to heat up from the three-point line. Boston's defense had a ton of trouble staying in front of Darius Garland, and with the paint collapsing, he consistently found the open man, so all those wings had to do was spot up and shoot. The Celtics are typically one of the best teams in the NBA at limiting dribble penetration, and it's because they like to switch every action to force guys to beat them in isolation. The problem is that against a guy as shifty as Garland, he's going to take those one-on-one matchups and consistently beat his defender, putting that backline help in a really tough spot. With that said though, the reason this usually works so well for Boston is that they don't really have mismatches. When Mobley comes off a screen from Strus, the matchup goes from Tatum to Brown, and that really isn't an advantage as both are capable of playing much bigger than their positions. In this game though, because Jrue Holiday was out, they had to have a mismatch on the floor, and during these minutes it was Sam Hauser who the Cavs relentlessly hunted. Mitchell was looking for the Hauser matchup every time down, and the Celtics had to make tough decisions. They could either leave him one-on-one or they could come with a double, but this time Pritchard misses the rotation and Garland's left with a wide open three. Let's rewind a few minutes though, because I also want to talk about Cleveland's defense. They went back to the 2-3 zone against Boston's 5-out lineup in hopes of keeping Allen at the rim, but Boston came prepared. They know that Allen's going to stay near the paint, so Horford's going to set a screen towards the top of the key, forcing Okoro to step over to the ball and leaving Wade in a 2-on-1 situation on the weak side. Then all Tatum has to do is get the ball to the wing, and they've got a three. It was that simple, and the Celtics did this over and over again, moving the ball from one wing to the other to get a good look from three. So that zone didn't last long, and the Cavs went back to switching on all screens, letting Allen pick up the ball and defend in space. The problem is that switching leads to mismatches, and unlike the healthy Celtics, they've got a few of them, such as Garland on Jaylen Brown. That meant Boston's offense was all about handpicking a matchup and playing one-on-one. On this one, Tatum gets Allen, and because he's the lone rim protector, Tatum attacks him in space and gets downhill for easy points. A play later, they set it up again, but this time Allen's a bit late stepping out on a screen, so Tatum's left with space to pull up for a triple. Just like in the first, Tatum was putting on an absolute clinic. Even when Mobley checked back in and aggressively played those driving lanes, he had no trouble getting to a tough outside jumper. I mentioned his 18 points in the first, well, he had 12 in the second, meaning that he had 30 in just the first half of play. As a result, both offenses were scorching hot to finish out the quarter, and by the time the second buzzer rolled around, the Celtics had a comfortable 74-64 advantage. To start the third, you could see the value of Boston switching on full display. Just watch Horford on this possession as he first defends Garland in space, then when it's moved to Strus, he picks him up off a peel switch, then when it's moved to Hunter, it's the exact same thing as he shuts off a drive and protects the rim. But the beginning of the third was actually about the Celtics offense and how they continued to attack mismatches. Brown was still hunting for Garland on switches and using his size and strength to muscle inside for points at the rim, and if the defense brought help to the paint or loaded up on a drive early, he'd find the open man, starting that domino effect where everyone's driving and kicking until they get the three-point shot that they want. As a result, the Cavs actually found themselves down 17 a few minutes into the quarter, and I'd say this top of the key triple from DeAndre Hunter sort of marked the shift. I mentioned earlier that Hauser was the lone mismatch on Boston. This is when the Cavs finally started to hunt for that switch every single time down the floor. And not only does that create a favorable one-on-one game for a guy like Garland, it puts the rest of the defense in a tough spot, such as when Strus slips the screen, gets it in the short roll, and quickly lobs it up to Allen. It was Garland's brilliance in isolation that stole the show though. The combination of handle and agility is matched by few, so against a mismatch, he was able to consistently get to the paint with ease. Around this time, the Cavs also adjusted their defense against Boston's isolations. A staple of the Celtics is to put one of their guards in the dunker spot to eliminate rim protection. So what the Cavs did is they had that defender abandon the dunker and only worry about playing the drive, knowing that if the ball gets dropped off, that smaller guy isn't much of a threat to score down low. Anytime the Celtics weren't in a 5-out setup, whoever was guarding the dunker could park in the driving lane, and once again they were able to force Tatum into some tough jumpers. For reference, here's what it looked like when that defender wasn't able to get into position in time. Tatum goes to work on Allen, Horford seals off Hunter on the wrong side of the paint, and it's an automatic blow-by for easy points. Even when they were able to load up early and avoid layups though, it really didn't make much of a difference because of the mode Tatum was in as a scorer. This was honestly one of the best games I've ever seen him play, and one of the best shot-making games I've seen from anyone this season. But the Cavs had one more adjustment in their back pocket. Instead of a 2-3 zone, they went to a 2-1-2 zone with Mobley playing up at the free throw line. And just this minor tweak meant that if the Celtics wanted to set a ball screen up top, instead of forcing another wing to rotate over, Mobley would just jump out to get a hand up on the pull-up jumper. On the one possession they went back to man though, Tatum was right back to doing what he does best, attacking a mismatch one-on-one and getting a bucket. However, the Cavs were able to match the onslaught from Tatum this time around, and that's because Donovan Mitchell started to seriously heat up. Because the Celtics closed the third with Luke Kornet, Mitchell was putting him in the pick and roll and attacking that deep drop coverage. So he had himself a quarter, 14 points to be exact, and that included everything from dunks and floaters to catch and shoot threes. Then when they found themselves down one possession on the final play of the quarter, Mitchell went for the tie on a pull-up three, but it just missed, so Boston was able to cling on to that dwindling lead. For whatever reason though, the Celtics kept Kornet on the floor to start the fourth, and I honestly think it would have been worth it to try a smaller lineup just so you could get a fifth shooter in there. As long as Kornet's in the game, Mobley only has to worry about protecting the paint, which means that nobody on Boston could create clean driving lanes. They tried to counter by pulling Mobley into some screening action, but he's quick to recover to the paint without giving up an advantage, and so the best offense they could get was a pull-up midi from Brown, which is still a pretty tough shot. And speaking of Mobley, he was also at the center of Cleveland's offense during this time, which really speaks to his versatility as a two-way star. Kornet was matched up with him and continued to roam into the paint, to which Mobley countered by spotting up for a three. Not just one three, but a second one while trailing the play in transition, which gave Cleveland their first lead of the entire game. That prompted the Celtics to get Tatum back on the floor immediately, and they made a minor adjustment of their own. Instead of a guard or a big in the dunker, they put Jaylen Brown there so the Cavs couldn't load up early. A play later, they actually decided to try loading up early anyways, with Okoro cheating over to deny Tatum a touch, but just leaving Brown for a brief moment is all it takes for him to find a shot that he likes and knock it down. What the Cavs did to adjust though is they put Mobley on Brown and let him roam in the paint to take away those clean driving lanes, once again forcing Tatum into some tougher looks. Then when it was Brown who had the ball, Mobley would match up with Horford, and words can't describe the impact he had on Boston's offense as a roamer. On the other side of things, Kornet was no longer in the game, so they went back to attacking Hauser, and that meant it was time for another run from Mitchell. The combination of a scorching hot Mitchell and a mismatch in Hauser is a recipe for disaster, as he and the Cavs got pretty much whatever they wanted. But it wasn't just Mitchell. This time Hauser finds himself cross-matched with Mobley, and instead of hunting for a switch, Mobley immediately sprints to the paint while Mitchell starts a drive, knowing that there's no rim protection or rebounding in position to stop them from getting easy offense. In addition to the impact on defense, Mobley had himself 11 points and 4 offensive rebounds in the quarter, and that type of two-way value against a top contender is stuff you only see from superstars. Kenny Atkinson decided to get really weird though. Instead of closing with Mobley, they went to a small ball lineup of their own for one of the first times this entire season, and that basically took away all of their resistance in the paint. The idea was to create a more potent 5-out offense of their own. With 5 shooters on the floor and Mitchell hunting for Hauser, the Celtics had to choose between letting him go to work one-on-one or giving up a quality 3. But that was also how the Celtics operated, and now without a rim protector on the floor to play cleanup, they were able to get whatever they wanted going downhill. So the game quite literally turned into a contest of who could do a better job of attacking mismatches, and that's really tough to win against two of the most skilled wings in the sport. Brown started to take over during these minutes, hunting for the switch onto Garland every possession and using all of that space to get to the paint for easy points. But the Cavs had a similar thing going for them. They basically had 5 40% three-point shooters on the floor at the same time, which meant that Mitchell had so much space to operate. So he continued to attack Hauser and put pressure on the rim, with this huge bucket plus the foul giving him a chance to make it a 2-possession game. From there, getting stops becomes priority number 1, which meant they got Mobley back on the floor, and this illegal screen right here sort of felt like the moment where everyone knew the Cavs were going to pull this one out. The Celtics had a chance to make it a 1-possession game, but Derek White wasn't able to hit the pull-up 3, and then it was Garland's turn to attack the Hauser switch as he did his thing in isolation and hit what would ultimately be the dagger. After that, it was a matter of theatrics, and the game was pretty much sealed. Down 25-3 in the opening minutes, down 17 in the third quarter, the Cavs responded to adversity in the best way possible and found a way to win on Boston's home floor. These two teams split the season series 2-2, which makes a potential conference finals matchup all the more exciting. But of those 4 games, there wasn't a single one where both teams had their entire rosters. In this game specifically, I think the loss of Holiday hurt just as much as Porzingis. Don't get me wrong, Kristaps would have taken all of Kornet's minutes, which, by the way, were a -26 and arguably their biggest problem, but the Cavs closed out this game in the third and fourth by relentlessly hunting for Hauser in every action, who wouldn't have been running in Drew's place. Drew brings together that switch-heavy scheme with his ability to defend multiple positions, and it sort of falls apart if just one piece to the puzzle is missing. However, my bigger takeaway from this game is what we saw from the Cavs. It's easy to point to the response to adversity and say they've proven themselves, but I'm more so talking about the creativity from the coaching staff and willingness to try a ton of different things. When the 2-3 zone fell apart, they adjusted by switching it to a 2-1-2. When the offense stalled due to a lack of space, they went away from the double big look. You might not have noticed, but Allen didn't play a single minute in the fourth quarter. Then when they wanted even more space, they ran 3.5 minutes of no big at all, which is something I didn't even know they were willing to do. As a result, they not only scraped out a huge statement win, they survived a game where both Tatum and Brown played amazing. Those two combined for 83 points and still lost. The Cavs have now won 9 games in a row, are 49-10 with multiple big wins against top contenders, and this matchup with the Celtics has the potential to be one of the best Eastern Conference battles we've ever seen. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you thought of this game. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.